Good afternoon, everyone. Lynn Thayer here, and today we're actually going to talk about a topic that has affected many people. Actually, we're going to talk about childhood abuse, effects of childhood emotional trauma, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, or mental abuse, and how that affects us in our health over a lifespan. And so the effects of emotional trauma or abuse across a lifespan is possibly the most underexposed risk factor for all major chronic health problems in the world. So we can't afford to ignore the impact of what we call adverse childhood events, or ACEs is what it's called in the studies. So the study showed that 67% of all adults had experienced at least one ACE, adverse childhood effect, and of those, 80 had experienced more than one. So that's quite a high number, 80%. So having a high level of ACEs are correlated with dramatic increases in the risk of developing 7 of the top 10 causes of death. So if you have 4 or more ACEs, your relative risk of chronic pulmonary disorder is 2.5 times higher versus people with none. Your hepatitis risk is 2.5 times higher. Depression is 4.5 times higher. Cancer is 2.5 times higher. Diabetes is 1.6 times higher. Having a stroke is 2.6 times higher, and being suicidal is 12 times higher. So 8 or more ACEs triple risk of lung cancer and increase the risk 3.5 times higher for heart disease. So there's a huge connection there from the research. So a person with 6 or more ACEs has a reduced lifespan of 20 years. Research has shown that there's a 6-fold increased risk of chronic fatigue syndrome with ACEs. One study showed 60% of women with fibromyalgia had suffered sexual abuse. So in 2009, they completed another study surveying 15,300 adults. And what they found was that if you had 2 or more ACEs, you're 100% more likely to be diagnosed with a rheumatoid or a rheumatic disease. So in the late 1980s, the original Kaiser Permanente researcher, Dr. Belletti, began a systematic study of obese people and discovered that 50% had been sexually abused as children. The rate is more than 50% higher than the rate normally reported by women. So that rate really is much higher than what it is, and more than triple the average rate in men. So this was the original study that triggered the larger studies in the 1990s. So being subjected to moderate abuse during childhood results in a 34% increased risk of developing obesity as an adult, and a 50% increased risk of developing obesity in adulthood if exposed to severe abuse, according to a meta-analysis carried out by an institute in Sweden, which included a total of 112,000 participants in this study. So how do you calculate your ACEs score? Well, I'm going to add this video to my website, and at the bottom of the video, I'm going to have a written document with the questions so that you can actually find out your ACEs score. But I'm going to go over it here with you as well. So to calculate, ACE is the abbreviation of adverse childhood experience. So there are 10 types of ACEs as defined by the original and ongoing research between the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta and Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. So in the first study completed in 98 of 17,500 adults, the ACEs included parents separating or divorced is one, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, physical and emotional neglect, domestic violence, mental illness in the family, substance abuse, incarceration by a related family member. So the questions below that I'm going to ask you are 10 ACEs, and they were originally designed by the co-principal investigators of the study. So prior to your 18th birthday, question number 1, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid or that you might be physically hurt? So that's question number one. Question number two is, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, throw something at you, or even hit you so hard that you had marks or you were injured? Question three, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch, fondle, or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Question four, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or supported each other? Question five, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear perhaps dirty clothes, or had no one to protect you? Or were your parents drunk or high, too high to take care of you or to take you to the doctor if you needed it? Question number six, were your parents ever separated or divorced? Question seven, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Or ever repeatedly hit over the last few minutes, or threatened with any gun or knife? Did you live with anyone who had a problem with drinking or alcohol, or who used street drugs? The next question, number nine, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member ever attempt suicide? And lastly, number 10, did a household member go to prison? So now you would add up your scores of yeses or no. So your total ACEs are only a guide, and the original 10 types of ACEs described above are certainly not an exhaustive list. They were simply mentioned the most by a group of people originally interviewed by the Kaiser Permanente and were well researched and published in this literature. So to get extended scores and more questions, I will have some websites listed in my blog post about this topic. So just want to go over some further considerations, because there are additional sources of trauma which should also be considered as you investigate the likelihood that your health may have been affected by some adverse experience in the past. So number one is intergenerational trauma. Emotional trauma has also been found to be inherited epigenetically. So for example, third generation children of the survivors of the Holocaust have been found to have the same physiological symptoms of trauma as their grandparents. Also, the prenatal period, the time that we are in our mother's womb, is a critical time when trauma experienced by our mothers can be passed on to the unborn child. So consider the questions below in relation to your overall ACEs score. Was there significant trauma experienced by your mother during her pregnancy with you? What are your parents or caregivers' ACEs scores? It would be important to get them to do the questionnaire as well. Were your parents or grandparents ever affected by war, political upheaval, or other adverse events listed during their lifetime? So number two is covert trauma. Covert trauma is more subtle forms of emotional abuse from caregivers, where although there's no overt physical or sexual abuse, the chronic emotional abuse or neglect can take an even greater toll on children than overt trauma. So there are certain factors that can make it more likely that an adverse childhood experience will traumatize us with lasting effects on our physical and mental well-being. And these include, number one, being a highly sensitive person. I know for me, I'm a highly sensitive person. I've been told I'm a bit of an empath, where I can take on other people's energies just by walking into the room and being in their environment. I can feel it. And so some people are naturally more emotionally sensitive and aware. And they are often empaths who can easily feel other people's feelings and read emotional energy in a room. Their nervous system is therefore more acutely sensitive, and you may be one of those types of people yourself. Number two, so did you have no outside support? So if during childhood there was no outside support, or the ACEs were faced, maybe it was a family secret, research shows the impact is worse for the child. Research shows just having one reliable adult to speak to about their experience can help the child bounce back from the ACEs. So if something happened way back in the 60s or 70s, depending on how old you are, and it was never talked about, then that can definitely impact your health. Trapped negative emotions in the body has been shown to cause disease. So number 3, how you store memories of an event, your ability to reframe the meaning, and even your beliefs about emotional stress itself will affect how an ACEs impacts your health and well-being. So how does our childhood biography become our biography? So people who experience trauma in childhood have an increased risk of 7 out of 10 of the top 10 causes of death and a 20-year reduction in lifespan. How does emotional trauma and early life stress change our biology over a lifetime? It turns out that emotional trauma has an effect on 3 major areas. So those 3 areas are, first, our behavior, our biochemistry, and our beliefs, all of which lead to diseases and health conditions later in life. So let's first take a quick look at behavior. So people with ACEs are more likely to lack education about health, lifestyle patterns, and a study of 28,000 people showed people with 4 or more ACEs are less likely to be educated about health, with a 21% increased chance that they will live below the poverty line, 39% more likely to be unemployed, and 27% less likely to have a college degree. However, the lack of education is not enough to explain the level of destructive health behaviors found in people with ACEs. Unresolved emotional trauma from childhood leads to addictions and other habits like overeating to suppress or distract from emotional pain caused from trauma. The same study of 28,000 people showed that if a person has 4 or more ACEs, they are 10.3 times more likely to use injection drugs, 7.4 times more likely to be an alcoholic, 2.93 times more likely to be a smoker, 3.2 times more likely to binge drink, and 3.3 times more likely to engage in risky sexual behavior. So clearly, these behaviors will lead to increased risk of disease like hepatitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So ACEs also lead to other destructive health patterns, which then lead to a lack of healthy self-care, including people who work all the time, workaholism, perfectionism, overachievement, overgiving, discounting personal needs, eating disorders, and much more. So an example of how an ACE can sabotage healthy behaviors is demonstrated by the original research that was sent out. And in the obese clinic, the doctors couldn't understand why people would be doing great on their weight loss program, and then 55% of them would actually drop out. They would give up or leave. So they began to systematically study obese people and discovered that 50% had been sexually abused as children. That rate is more than 50% higher than the rate normally reported by women. So the participants would report increasing anxiety and panic attacks when they were losing weight successfully. One woman had suffered sexual abuse in childhood, summed up the problem when she expressed that being overweight was her protection mechanism. It put men off from giving unwanted attention and provided a layer of protection. These findings kicked off a much larger study starting in the mid-1990s with the CDC. However, behavior is not enough to explain the increased risk of health conditions later in life. So the ACEs clearly impact behavior, but it turns out it's not enough to explain the increased risk of health conditions that are later. So this was also found to be true in a study published by the Biomedical Center in 2010, which studied over 17,000 adults on the link between ACEs, smoking, and lung cancer. So the research stated that adverse childhood experiences may be associated with increased risk of lung cancer. And the increase in risk may only be partly explained by smoking, suggesting other possible mechanisms as well. So there's so many, behaviors that can be changed through awareness is the first step, is the first key, definitely. So I want to talk just a little bit about beliefs right now, because as stated above in the example of the obesity study, the ACEs impact our beliefs, which can lead to destructive health behaviors, like not sticking to a weight loss program due to the belief that thin was actually unsafe, or being attractive is actually unsafe. So beliefs have an extremely powerful effect on biology, directly and indirectly via behavior. So the most studied and tested effects on biology and science is probably the placebo effect, because every randomized controlled trial has a control group to rule out the placebo effect. A strong, powerful belief that something will heal us usually does, even if it's just a sugar pill. So presently, a full 1/3 of all illnesses are healed by the magic of the placebo effect. The opposite of a placebo effect is the nocebo effect, where a strong, powerful belief that we should be sick or are going to be sick manifests in reality. We can actually create it if we believe it. So in a paper published in the Journal of American Medical Association called Nocebos Contribute to Host of Ills, the author states, in the Framing Heart study, women who believe that they are prone to heart disease were nearly 4 times as likely to die as women with similar risk factors who didn't believe that they would. So when we're exposed to an ACE, much of the time we are unable to process and release the impact of the traumatic event at the time. It becomes stored in the unconscious mind, in our neurology, and in the body. World-leading experts in trauma recovery discuss this in one of the books, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in Healing of Trauma. So when traumatized, the body remembers. Time does not heal, it does conceal. And our biography eventually becomes our biology. After an ACE, the traumatized part of the psyche becomes dissociated from us, meaning it becomes unconscious. Often we lose touch with the emotions related to it completely. However, there are parts of us that are angry, perhaps, crying, we're feeling those emotions and we're fearful, and it's coming from that trauma that sometimes you can't even remember it, but it's still there in the unconscious mind. So these parts of us can have unconscious beliefs associated with them, and that might be having feelings of unworthiness, or feelings of not being able to be well and feel well, maybe feelings of being ashamed or shame, and like we don't deserve good things in life. It's almost like we're being punished for having this ill health. So we may have a conscious belief that we can be well and recover from illness, but this can be sabotaged by your unconscious belief systems linked to trauma from the adverse childhood effects. So science does not yet fully understand how conscious and unconscious beliefs can change biology, cause spontaneous disease remissions and so forth, but it actually happens all the time. So many clinicians and healers have observed that unconscious beliefs and conflicts of consciousness that are not consciously processed can become symbolically expressed via pain and illness in the body. So it can start out with a headache or migraines. Maybe you've got pain in the body and back pain. And oftentimes, we're not bringing to conscious awareness what we're feeling right now, right? We want to dissociate from it. We want to do other things to forget and numb ourselves, whether that's eating food or drinking alcohol or doing drugs or, binging on working and Netflix and Facebook and all the other things. So what are the actual benefits of becoming more resilient and resolving that emotional trauma once and for all, going to root cause and getting rid of it without actually having to go into it, talk about it, and re-traumatize yourself. Because that's what often happens if you're made to talk about the trauma over and over again and relive it, then that actually will affect your nervous system and your neurology. And it actually can make it worse. So if there was a way for you to resolve this emotional trauma without having to do that, would that be of interest to those of you where you want to actually get rid of it? You can move forward and become healthier. So once you start to clear your emotional trauma and align with your own balanced emotional energy source, you'll have great benefits such as more energy, excuse me, more resilience. You know, you'll be able to set boundaries a lot better once you're able to release some of this. The body aches and pains will disappear. You know, you'll have better sleep, more likely. And, you know, if you're able to get on a lifestyle plan where you're eating healthier foods, where you're getting the nutrients and the supplements you need to not only feed and fuel your body, but to feed your brain health, then that'll also help to make you feel better. Learning strategies to cope just with everyday life stressors is something as well. The body works more efficiently and processes all kinds of food better. So when your weight issues normalize, there'll be less struggling with your mind and more connection to your own sensuality and your own feelings, your own emotions. Relationships with those closest to you can change. And, excuse me, your physical relationships with your partner will change. Your body can cleanse itself of toxins. And you can gain clarity of the mind. You become, you know, maybe a little bit more clear in your decision-making capabilities. So what are some of the steps that you could take to help heal emotional trauma? Well, the first one is to know yourself. Awareness and knowledge itself can actually help heal. You need to calculate your ACEs score and take an inventory of events so that you know what is happening in your body. You may have to reset your stress response, leading to, you know, if you don't, then it can lead to chronic inflammation in the body. Some people find it very beneficial to journal. So journal writing about emotional experience has been shown to have therapeutic effects just to get it out on paper. And then once you do have it out, if you want to actually shred it or burn it, then that can also send a signal to your unconscious mind that you're releasing it and letting it go. So another thing to do is to check in with your behaviors. Are they leading to addictive or destructive health patterns, and the inability to stick to a healthy life program or health program? With your personality, explore, you know, the impacts on your core personality. Has this led you to perhaps perfectionism, overachieving, or overgiving at the cost of your own ability to relax and commit to self-care for yourself? There's a good book called Childhood Disrupted by Donna Jackson, excuse me, to explore the science of ACEs and read patient stories of recovery. So sometimes reading about this can help you as well with your own recovery. So when it comes to results, have you tried everything on the physical side, but still have not gotten the results? You still feel stressed, your body feels inflamed, perhaps you're not functioning optimally and you don't have that energy. So could it be that you have not addressed your ACEs yet? So you can go, I'll have a link below on my website to do the questionnaire. And then another step to address is your physical body and the environment that you live in. So when reversing the physical impacts of ACEs have had on the body, we need to address the impact of stress. Address diet and environmental factors that will contribute to stress and inflammation in the body. Remember, the body does not differentiate between physical, chemical, electrical, or psychological trigger. It just reacts the same way. All these stressors will increase the overall load, known as the allostatic load, which will be contributing to the fires of inflammation and oxidative stress in the body and the brain. So complete, your home evaluation. Are you using toxic chemicals in your home? You want to detox your home as best as you can. So research has confirmed that lifestyle interventions, including things like yoga practice, maybe Tai Chi and meditation, can also help. Movement, weight training, and exercise is also very important for general health and reducing stress, and should be gradually reintroduced to your health regime if you're not currently doing it. So note, if your body is still programmed on a hyper stress response, high intensity exercise should be avoided for right now until your nervous system calms down. Focus on weight training and low intensity exercise, like yoga, until your autonomic nervous system is rebalanced. All right, so address your current relationship and cultural influences as well. So as you do heal from emotional trauma, your emotions will lift and you will not be resonating at the level that you were before. This is where sometimes other people could become a problem for you, because science has shown that if you spend time with people who do have a lot of trauma, perhaps negative thought patterns and emotions, your own brain and body will become entrained to theirs. And this will hold back your own healing. So be aware of your environment and who's around you. We've all heard the term energy vampires out there. Make sure to surround your people that are supportive, that are uplifting and positive, that can help to bring you forward in your goals for achieving optimal energy, health, and success for yourself. And getting professional help is one thing that can help. Dealing with those emotions. What helped me the most in my own recovery was timeline therapy techniques to release the emotions at root cause and detaches it from the events in your life without having to relive it. Hypnotherapy, hypnosis can also help getting to the unconscious mind to release things, and also to insert suggestions that are goals that you want for yourself. Positive things that you want for yourself can be inserted into a hypnotherapy session. And NLP coaching, neuro-linguistic coaching, NLP has been found to have several techniques that can help people to move them forward and calm the nervous system down. So if you have any questions or you'd like to learn more, please head on to my site, lynthier.com. And I'm wishing you a wonderful weekend. And December's already here. Another quick note, if you go to my website, you can also grab on the front page, a pop-up will come up with your goal-getting success planner. So you can get that for free on my site. And it talks about timeline therapy and how to insert a future goal into your timeline. So again, my name's Lynthier, and be well. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.